The call came on a Tuesday, one of those gray, listless afternoons where the sky over Fagville seemed to press down on the city. Liam had been gone for 3 weeks, deployed to some corner of the world the news only mentioned when things went wrong. I was trying to lose myself in the mindless rhythm of a video game when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Her voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "James?" It was Emily, Liam's mom. I sat up straight, my focus snapping away from the screen. "Emily, hey. Is everything okay?" A pause stretched on the line filled with a static that felt more emotional than electronic. "I'm fine," she said, though the words sounded hollow. I was just calling to see how you were." It was a strange reversal. I was the one who was supposed to be checking in on her. I'd seen her a few times since Liam left. Mostly brief, polite exchanges when I had stopped by to mow the lawn or take out the trash cans. Things Liam had asked me to handle. In all the years I had known her, she was always just Liam's mom, a constant, pleasant presence in the background of our friendship. She was attractive, sure, with a kind of timeless grace for a woman in her early 40s, but she existed in a separate category, one I'd never given a second thought. "I'm good," I answered, trying to sound reassuring. "Just working. How are you holding up?" Another silence, then the words that would change everything. Spoken so softly I almost missed them. "I don't like being here by myself, James." The honesty of it hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't a complaint or a plea for pity. It was a simple, stark statement of fact. I didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry," was all I could manage. "Don't be," she said, and I could hear a faint, sad smile in her voice. "It's just quiet. Too quiet." She trailed off and I found myself picturing her in that house. The one that had always been filled with the noise of Liam and me growing up, now silent as a tomb, finding a spot on the wall to focus on. The air between us suddenly felt charged, thick with an unspoken awkwardness. "Hey, James," she said, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. "You didn't have to rush over." I fumbled with the bag of takeout in my hands, holding it up like a shield. "It's no problem. I figured you probably hadn't eaten." She laughed softly, a sound that was both musical and weary, and brushed a wet strand of hair from her forehead. "I hadn't," she admitted. "Just got out of the shower. Come on in. Don't stand out there." I stepped inside. The familiar scent of her home. A mix of laundry detergent and something floral washing over me. But it felt different now. Emptier. She wasn't a stranger, but this new context made her feel like one. I had always seen her as a composed maternal figure, the one who made us snacks and told us to keep the noise down. I had never considered the woman inside the role. Had never imagined feeling this strange pull toward her. We sat in the living room, the containers of Thai food spread out on the coffee table. At first, the conversation was light, focused on safe topics like work and the weather. But as we ate, I watched her start to unwind. She began to talk about her life, about how the silence in the house felt like a weight, how every creak of the floorboards reminded her that she was alone. She spoke of her fear for Liam, a constant low hum of anxiety beneath the surface of her days. For the first time, I wasn't talking to my best friend's mother. I was talking to Emily, a woman sharing a moment of raw, unguarded honesty with me. And the way she looked at me with an intensity that seemed to see right through me suggested she was genuinely interested in what I had to say, that my presence mattered. That's when something shifted inside me. I started to see her differently. There was a depth to her I'd never noticed. A strength laced with a vulnerability that was incredibly compelling. She offered a faint, almost mysterious smile. "You've grown up so much, James," she said. Her voice soft through my chest that had nothing to do with the spicy food. "Anytime," I said, and I meant it. As I walked back to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that a fundamental boundary had been blurred. Something unspoken had taken root between us, and I had no idea where it would lead. The next time I saw Emily, it was completely by chance. I was at the grocery store a week later picking up a few things for dinner when I saw her in the pasta aisle. She was holding a jar of marinara sauce, studying the label with a small, focused frown. For some reason, the simple domestic image of hers struck me profoundly. How had I never noticed how naturally beautiful she was? It wasn't just her looks. It was the way she moved with a quiet confidence and an understated elegance. She carried herself like she knew a secret the rest of the world hadn't figured out yet. I hadn't expected to see her, and frankly, I was unsure how to act. We hadn't spoken since that strange, intimate evening at her house, but something about that night had lingered with me, replaying in my mind that odd hours. The way her smile didn't always reach her eyes. The way she had looked at me as if I were an anchor in a storm. I had tried to dismiss it as a one-time emotionally charged event, a product of her loneliness and my concern. But then she looked up, her eyes scanning the aisle, and they landed on me. "James," she said, her voice a soft murmur, but her smile was calm and genuinely welcoming. It was the kind of smile that could instantly put a person at ease. I smiled back, trying to force a casualness I didn't feel. "Hey, Emily. Fancy seeing you here. Just grabbing a few things for dinner," she replied, gesturing with the jar of sauce toward her nearly empty cart. "What about you?" It was a simple question, but it bloomed into a full conversation right there between the canned tomatoes and dried pasta. We talked about food, about a coming storm, about the trivialities of daily life. But underneath the surface of the small talk, there was that same thrum of something deeper, that subtle but palpable tension. It was in the little glances, the quiet pauses, the way we stood, invitation. The simple request for company made it impossible to say no. Before I could overthink it, I heard myself agreeing. "Yeah, sure. I'd like that." And that was it. I had no idea what I was walking into. But later that evening, as I pulled up to her house, a nervous energy buzzed in my chest. I felt like I was crossing a threshold into uncharted territory. When I stepped inside, the house felt as warm and familiar as ever. The aroma of garlic and herbs drifted from the kitchen, filling the space with a comforting warmth that felt almost too inviting. Emily was already there, humming softly to herself as she stirred a simmering pot on the stove. I paused in the doorway, just watching her for a moment, and that's when it hit me. The woman standing in front of me didn't feel like the Emily I'd known for years. She looked the same, but something in her posture, in the way she moved, felt more authentic, more open. "Go ahead and have a seat," she said, glancing over her shoulder with a smile. "Dinner's almost ready." I took a seat at the kitchen table, trying to keep my hands from fidgeting. She moved around the kitchen with an effortless grace, a complete sense of belonging. Meanwhile, I sat there trying to make sense of the storm of feelings inside me. It wasn't just about her physical attractiveness or how at ease she seemed. It was about how she made me feel seen, valued, as if I were more than just her son's friend who was helping out. We ate, and the conversation flowed even more easily than it had the first time. There were no awkward silences, no forced pleasantries. We talked about life, about how things rarely go according to plan. She spoke about her younger days before she was a wife and mother, and how she missed the thrill of spontaneity, the feeling of being excited about the unknown. She confessed that with her husband having passed years ago and now Liam deployed, her life had settled into a predictable, lonely routine. A raw edge entered her voice when she said it. Felt like she was releasing. The dynamic between us had shifted into something new, something we didn't have to name to understand. When it was time for me to leave, she walked me to the door and gave me a hug. It was simple, brief, and warm, but her hand lingered on my back for a fraction of a second too long, and that small gesture stayed with me. "Take care, James," she whispered, her voice barely audible. My head was spinning as I walked to my car. The evening has seemed so innocent on the surface, yet it had unlocked something inside me. I couldn't define it. She hadn't done anything overtly suggestive, but the way she looked at me, the way she listened, it made me feel a genuine connection, a bond that was entirely separate from Liam. I had been to this house hundreds of times, but this visit was different, and I hated how much I thought about it in the days that followed. I tried to push it away, to pretend nothing had happened, to file it under being a good friend. A few days later, some of our mutual friends called and asked if I wanted to grab a drink. I figured getting out would be good for me, a way to clear my head. But as soon as I walked into the dimly lit bar, I saw her. Emily was sitting at a high-top table with a couple of her friends. She saw me at the same time and her face broke into a smile as she waved me over. Without thinking, I waved back. Her smile was relaxed, but it held a warmth that hadn't been there before. An unspoken familiarity that made my stomach do a slow, nervous flip. "James," she said as I approached the table. "I didn't expect to see you out tonight." I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Just meeting up with some friends. Didn't know this was your spot." She let out a light laugh. "It's not just catching up with these two. I haven't had a girls' night in forever." Her gaze held mine for a beat longer than necessary. And just like that, the tension was back. That subtle undercurrent that hummed between us, always there just beneath the surface. I should have made an excuse, said my hellos, and found my own friends. But I didn't. "It's Emily. How have you really been?" She paused, her smile fading slightly. For a moment, I saw something raw and unguarded in her eyes. "I'm getting by," she said quietly. "It's just, I've been feeling a little lonely lately." Her honesty caught me off guard again. It was as if she'd peeled back another layer, revealing someone I hadn't known existed. Someone who was so much more than just Liam's mom. "Yeah," I replied, nodding slowly. "I can understand that. It can't be easy." She gave a small nod in return, and we sat in silence for a moment. It wasn't awkward. It was comfortable, filled with a shared understanding. I wanted to say something more, something to comfort her, to ease the burden I could see she was carrying. But the words wouldn't come. So, I just looked at her, wondering if she was simply stating a fact or if she was gently hinting at something more. My friends came back with the drinks, and the moment passed. But something inside me had shifted again. That night, my perception of Emily was irrevocably altered. She was no longer just a friend's parent. There was a different kind of light around her now, a dangerous and alluring one. Later, when we all decided to head home, I walked with my friends to their car, but my mind was stuck on that brief, quiet conversation with her. What did she really mean by lonely? Was it just the absence of her son? Or was she softly, tentatively asking for something more? As soon as I got home, I collapsed onto my couch and replayed the entire night in my head. The dinner, the bar, that confession, that look in her eyes. It was then that I finally admitted to myself that this wasn't just a series of coincidences. There was something real happening between us, something unspoken and powerful. And whether I wanted to or not, I was being drawn into it. The scariest part, I wasn't sure I wanted to resist anymore. The next few days felt heavy with unspoken thoughts. I couldn't stop thinking about the bar, about the way Emily had opened up to me. Her quiet admission of loneliness echoed in my mind, and her gaze, which seemed to search for something in me, was burned into my memory. There was a weight in the air between us now, a tangible thing. Physically, I could quiet the noise in my mind. When I got to the court, the guys were already there warming up. "About time, man." One of them, Nathan, called out, tossing me the ball. "Thought you forgot about us." I forced a smile. "Had to take care of something," I lied. We played hard for the next hour, joking, talking trash, pushing each other. But my head wasn't in the game. My mind was somewhere else entirely, in a quiet house across town with the woman who was both achingly familiar and dangerously new. After a while, we took a break, collapsing on the edge of the court. Out of the blue, Nathan turned to me, wiping sweat from his brow. "Hey, you talked to Liam lately?" The question caught me off guard. "Yeah, a couple days ago. The connection was pretty bad, but he sounded okay." Nathan nodded, staring at the cracked pavement. "I just got off a video call with him this morning. He asked about his mom. He says she sounds distant." I felt a jolt in my gut. He's worried about her. Says she's not herself, but she just brushes it off when he asks. He thinks she's going through something. That hit harder than I expected. I'd always seen Emily as this pillar of strength, a steady and composed presence, never rattled. But maybe that was just a facade. Maybe I was the only one seeing the cracks because I was the only one this close. "I don't know," I said, keeping my voice carefully neutral. I've been checking in. She seems okay to me, just lonely, you know? He shook his head. Nah, he said, it's more than that. He's worried, man. He asked me to ask you to keep a closer eye on her. I didn't know what to say. A part of me wanted to confess everything, to tell him about the weird tension, about the change I'd seen in her and felt in myself. But I couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Maybe she just needs some space, I offered, trying to sound casual. Yeah, maybe, Nathan mumbled. But I could tell he wasn't convinced. The weight of his words of Liam's concern relayed from thousands of miles away settled heavily on me. We finished our game and I drove home. But my gut was twisted in knots the whole way. A feeling of dread building with every mile. Hey, she said, her voice overly bright. But I could see it. The fatigue in her eyes, the rigid set of her shoulders. She was putting on a performance. I sat down in the armchair across from her. You okay? I asked gently. Emily took a shaky breath and finally let the facade drop. No, she whispered. It's just been one of those weeks. I feel like I'm falling apart, and I'm trying so hard not to. My heart ached for her. I didn't know how to fix it. I went to the kitchen to get her a glass of water, needing a moment to breathe myself, to escape the heavy atmosphere in the living room. As I was filling the glass, I heard her footsteps behind me. Emily was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed over her chest. James, she said quietly, her voice calm but direct. Can we talk for a minute? I turned around, my guard instantly up. Yeah, of course. What's on your mind? She walked into the kitchen, softly closing the door behind her. The small space shrank and I felt my chest tighten as she stepped closer. I wanted to thank you, she said, her gaze not quite meeting mine. For the other night and for tonight. It's meant a lot. I swallowed hard, her words affecting me more than I wanted to admit. Of course, I managed to say. You know I'm here if you ever need to talk. She nodded slowly, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was dense, buzzing with everything we weren't saying. Then her eyes finally met mine, and they were filled with a raw, searching emotion. That spark I'd felt before was back, humming between us like a high-tension wire. You're a good man, James, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Liam is lucky to have you as a friend. He's my brother, I said quietly. She smiled, but there was something else in that smile. Something sad and complicated that I couldn't quite decipher. I wondered if she was thinking the same thing I was, if she felt the same terrifying pull. For a fleeting second at the performance, every time she entered the room, my eyes would follow her. I noticed the small things, the way she tilted her head when she was listening, the way her gaze would meet mine for just a second longer than necessary. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. I felt it. Then came Saturday. I was at her house fixing a leaky faucet under the sink, a task that was taking me way longer than it should have. I was alone in the house. She'd gone out to run some errands. I was actually grateful for the solitude, for the space to think without the constant humming tension of her presence. I was just packing up my tools when I heard the front door open and close. A moment later, her voice called from the hallway, James. I stood up, wiping my hands on a rag. In the kitchen, I called back. My heart was already starting to beat a little faster. She walked into the room, setting her grocery bags on the counter. Her expression was unreadable. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual. She paused for a moment, then turned to face me. Can we talk? That simple question made my stomach clench. Yeah, of course, I said, leaning against the counter. She came and stood near me, not too close, but close enough that the space between us felt significant. The air grew heavy. The room felt smaller. I've been thinking a lot about our conversations, she began, her voice soft and careful. And I feel like I owe you an apology. I looked at her, completely thrown. This was not where I expected this to go. I realize I've been leaning on you a lot, she explained, twisting a ring on her finger. I've been going through some things, and it's not fair of me to put that on you. I blinked, trying to read her face. It's fine, I finally said. You don't have to apologize for that. That's what friends are for. She offered a weak smile at that, but something in her eyes told me she wasn't finished. There was more she wasn't saying. I appreciate that, she replied. But I think I may have crossed the line with you. My heart skipped a beat. This was it. The moment I had been both dreading and in some secret shameful part of myself, hoping for, mind racing. Every rational thought was screaming that this was wrong. A betrayal on so many levels. And yet there I was, not moving, not speaking, just listening. I don't want it to be weird either, I finally said, my voice strained. But I honestly don't know what you want me to say, Emily. She met my gaze then, her eyes direct and steady. We stood in silence for a long moment. The stillness was thick, laden with everything we couldn't say aloud. Then she reached out. Her hand brushed against mine on the counter. A touch so light it was barely there, but it sent an electric jolt through me. My breath caught in my throat. This isn't just me being lonely, James, she whispered, her eyes searching mine. I don't know what this is, but I can't ignore it anymore, and I don't want to. A tidal wave of emotions washed over me. Guilt, curiosity, desire, fear. I was acutely aware of the risk, of the devastation that would follow if Liam ever found out. But the connection between us felt too strong, too real to deny. And a part of me, the part that had felt seen and understood by her, didn't want it to stop. Are you sure? I asked, my voice wavering. I mean, with everything? She nodded, her fingers curling around mine. A firm, decisive grip. I'm sure. And with that, the invisible line we had been so carefully dancing around was erased. We didn't say anything else. There was nothing left to say. The air in the kitchen had changed. The weight of what we had just acknowledged settled over us. And I knew with a terrifying certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. It's been a year since that afternoon. A year of navigating a secret that felt both sacred and profane. A year of balancing the mundane reality of everyday life with the quiet, stolen moments we carved out for ourselves. In some ways, it feels like we've lived an entire lifetime in the spaces between. We didn't talk much about what we were. The thing that had begun with a phone call born of loneliness had not vanished. It has simply woven itself into the fabric of our lives, becoming a string together. And no matter how complicated or fraught with risk things became, being with her always felt right. Emily and I saw each other when we could, always careful not to be too frequent or too obvious. We never crossed the line into recklessness. We kept everything discreet, quiet, and out of sight. The hardest part was the pretending. When mutual friends were around, we'd keep our distance, acting as if we were nothing more than what we appeared to be. A son's friend and a friend's mother. But those small moments, the quick, meaningful glance across a room, the subtle smile that was only for me, the fleeting brush of our hands when no one was looking, they became our language. They were what held us together. When we were alone in the quiet of her house, we'd sometimes talk about what might happen if the truth ever came out. We never had a solid plan, just hazy what-ifs and half-formed ideas. But we didn't dwell on it for long. We stayed in the present, in the calm, in between spaces where we didn't have to justify ourselves to anyone, where we could simply be. It was a quiet Saturday evening, almost exactly a year after our relationship began. I was back at Emily's house, sitting on the couch, the same spot where she had first admitted her loneliness to me. The house was peaceful. We had the place to ourselves. Everything felt normal now, comfortable in a way that had once been so foreign. We had learned how to live this way in this quiet, careful, and deeply connected state. We didn't have to constantly talk about our feelings anymore. The relationship had settled into something steady, something real. It was unconventional, yes, but it had become something I couldn't imagine giving up. Emily sat next to me, looking as lovely as ever, but there was a softness in her posture now, an ease in her body, and a peace in her face that hadn't been there a year ago. It had taken time, but we had learned how to carry the weight of what we shared. We had grown into our secret. I had found a strange kind of peace in it. "Do you ever think about how we got here?" she asked softly, her voice a low, warm murmur that broke the comfortable silence. I smiled and leaned my head back against the cushions. "All the time," I admitted. Honestly, stand still. Me neither, she replied gently. Given the circumstances, I think we've done pretty well. I'm glad we kept it for ourselves. Her voice was firm, certain. It's ours. Just ours, James. And she was right. That was the most important part. It wasn't about anyone else. This was something we had built together. Quietly, carefully. I'm happy, I said softly, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. We're happy. That's what matters, Emily. We didn't say much after that. We didn't need to. We just sat there side by side, wrapped in a silence that didn't need filling, listening to the quiet ticking of the clock on the wall. A year had passed. A whole year of hiding in plain sight. We had somehow made it work. We had kept the secret. We had protected what we had. And through it all, we held on to the one thing that mattered most, each other. As the evening wore on, in the sky outside, deep into indigo, one thought was perfectly clear in my mind. This was how I wanted things to stay. It wasn't perfect. It was messy and complicated and wrong in so many ways, but it was ours.